I want to welcome to the show writer at the Dairyland Express and Packers Wire. He is Paul Bretl. Paul, what's up, man? How you doing tonight?
I'm doing excellent. Appreciate you having me back on, Trey. Looking forward to talking Packers and probably some Aaron Rodgers, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, Paul. Let's get right to it, Paul. Last week, Aaron Rodgers, he went on the Pat McAfee show and he announced that he intends to play for the New York Jets this season. So, what was your reaction, Paul, to Aaron Rodgers and his announcement that he plans to play for the New York Jets this season?
So I think everything leading up to that conversation with Pat McAfee pointed to that being the end result. But still hearing those words leave his mouth and there being obviously the trade and all that stuff to become official, but a finality to it and that this is going to happen. He says he wants to be a New York Jet. It was surreal. I thought I was prepared to hear that, but I wasn't, just because of obviously he's Aaron Rodgers, the Green Bay Packers. So it was surreal to say the least. Still obviously struggling to find the right words for it. But at the end of the day, I think it's the path we all expected, or the outcome that we all expected.
Now, Paul, I said on my show, listening to Aaron Rodgers on the Pat McAfee show, I had a couple different takeaways. And when he's on the Pat McAfee show, Paul, I listened to him real carefully because obviously I'm a Packers fan. And so when Aaron Rodgers speaks, I listen, okay? But there are some inconsistencies, Paul, on some things that he says. And one of the things that he said was, he said throughout the regular season, he felt like the Packers no longer wanted him back after this season. But in the immediate aftermath of the Packers losing to the Detroit Lions in the season finale, he said that the organization told him that they wanted him to return back to Green Bay and he could take all the time that he needed to make that decision or retire or whatever he wanted to do. So I thought he was a little inconsistent, Paul, because I didn't understand exactly what the Packers wanted to do with Aaron Rodgers once the season was over. And during the regular season, he said that they didn't want him back. He felt like they didn't want him back. And at the end of the season, when the season was over, he said he got the feeling that they wanted him back. So that you say what?
Yeah, there's obviously a lot of moving parts with that. And I think it was after the Bears game, the second one in Chicago, where Rodgers had the comment about it has to be a mutual decision.
Yeah.
On both sides for him to be back. And that was kind of the first moment where we, took a step back and thought, oh, maybe it's not a full foregone guarantee that he's going to return. And then Rodgers had mentioned as well during the interview that he felt, I think he said before he went into the darkness retreat, that he was like 90% thought he was going to retire, 10% he was going to play. So I wonder, maybe the Packers had that same inkling as well following the end of the regular season. Perhaps they thought that just giving him that space to make that decision to retire, they wouldn't have to be the ones to say, nope, we don't want you back anymore. So it's tough to decipher what went on behind the scenes, but I wonder if that was a part of it. If they felt that he's going to retire, let's just give him the time and space to make that decision. We'll go from there. But there's obviously so many moving parts, so many layers to this situation. And it's a big reason why all those layers, we haven't seen a trade go through at this point yet.
And for me, Paul, that was another takeaway that I had. He said he went into the darkness, 90% retired. And when he came out, he heard that the Packers were essentially shopping him. And then all of a sudden, he wants to play football again. So that's what didn't make sense to me. Like, if you were ready to retire, now all of a sudden you want to play again. To me, I feel like this is my belief, Paul. I believe that Aaron Rodgers' pride is in the way here because he doesn't want the Packers to quit on him. He wanted to quit on the Packers by either retiring and being done. He didn't want them to say, hey, even if you want to play, you can't play here in Green Bay. You can play elsewhere, but you can't play here. And that's exactly the situation that we are in. And again, like I said, I always say this, Jets fans, they're so excited, Paul, to
Mhm.
get Aaron Rodgers. But to me, if I was a fan of the Jets, I would think, how motivated truly are you to compete for a Super Bowl, considering when you went into the darkness, you were 90% retired, and all of a sudden now you're ready to play football again? If I was a Jets fan, I wouldn't have the confidence that Aaron Rodgers is committed to us being a better football team. To that, you say what, Paul?
I think there's no one out there, or very few of them, that play with a chip on their shoulder like Aaron Rodgers does. So if I'm a Jets fan, I'm excited that he's bringing that to New York and that mentality, because we've known that a lot of his career, especially early on, falling in the draft, he's still, that still burns within him to a degree. And as far as the coming out of the darkness retreat and switching, I guess I'm gonna assume that, because he said on, I can't remember his pad or one of the podcasts he's done, that each day he was in there, he visualized, I'm playing, and then the next day was, I'm retired. So I'm assuming the decision to decide to play and not retire was formulated in there. And then when he came out and heard that the Packers are shopping him, that probably just pushed him over the edge to say that he's going to play. And like I said, I'm guessing he's got a chip on his shoulder. So if you're a Jets fan, there's definitely a positive in that, as us as Packer fans have seen.
And listening to him speak, Paul, when he talks about Green Bay, he talks about the city of Green Bay. He talks about the fans. He talks about his teammates that he played with. And he talks about so many different things. But you know what he doesn't talk about? He never mentions Brian Gutekunst or Mark Murphy. And I think there's a disconnect between Rodgers and the Packers organization and the people who are making the decisions. But I think everyone else, they love Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers loves them. Do you agree with that notion, that everyone else, like fans, teammates, in the city, people in the city of Green Bay, they love Aaron Rodgers. He loves them, but there's a disconnect between Aaron Rodgers and the Packers organization?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely been one. That was a lot of what I think in 2021, when this all really began, what a big piece of Rodgers' frustrations were not just that they didn't bring back key players, but how the Packers went about it, from not, giving them a call to let them know that they weren't bringing them back, or, maybe not negotiating in the same capacity that the players wanted. I mean, that was a big part of Rodgers, the strain on the relationship that they had. And I think to a degree, he felt that was happening to him, especially now with, how he views that the team just decided to move on from him, even though he hadn't fully made his decision yet and let them know. And so I think that that's a part of it. And that Brian Gutekunst, Mark Murphy, they seem to have a working relationship, since 2021, but I think that's all it was at that point. That's the best that it could have been. It wasn't going to be anything beyond that. Like him and Matt LaFleur, he's accepting his MVP award. He's thanking Matt LaFleur. There's obviously a different relationship with those two than with Brian Gutekunst and Mark Murphy. And I think just things were never fully mended based on what we're seeing now. It's a working relationship. We have to do the work together the best we can to make this team successful. And Brian Gutekunst gave concessions in terms of what Rodgers wanted. But at the end of the day, it was just a working relationship.
And Paul, one thing for me, and I honestly, I compare Aaron Rodgers and the Packers organization, I compare it to a toxic relationship or toxic marriage. And I believe that this relationship was headed for divorce the moment the Packers selected Jordan Love in the 2020 NFL draft. And just like any toxic relationship, Paul, you have your happy moments in the toxic relationship or toxic marriage. And I believe that the Packers and Aaron Rodgers, they had some happy moments. He won NFL MVP back in the 2020-2021 season, and they were able to host back-to-back playoff games at Lambeau Field as well, Paul, and they were a contender in the NFC. So I think they had their happy moments, in the mix of this toxic relationship. But the moment that Aaron Rodgers had an off season where he doesn't play at the level that we're accustomed to seeing him play at, I think that was an opportunity for the Packers organization to move off of Aaron Rodgers. So that you say what, Paul?
Yeah, I agree. And I think, outside of Rodgers retiring, once they drafted Jordan Love, there was, I think very few, the chances were very slim that this was going to end in a amicable fashion where Rodgers retires and the Packers are able to transition to Jordan Love without anything that's like what is currently going on. But I think in addition to Rodgers having the down season, a big part of where the Packers are at now is the jump that Jordan Love took in year 3.
Yeah.
If we rewind to a year ago, I don't know that the Packers are handing out that contract, at least not in the magnitude that they did, if they feel about Jordan Love how they do now. Rodgers even said last June that he's going to retire a Packer. The way things were going, they didn't, at least from our viewpoint on the outside looking in, they didn't have the faith that they had in Jordan Love. And then last season unfolds and, they missed the playoffs. Jordan Love takes the big step forward. And I mentioned earlier, Rodgers after that Bears game said, it has to be a mutual decision for both parties. You wonder looking back now and hearing how Gutekunst feels about Love, but we've also heard Devondre Campbell, Dallin Levitt, Aaron Jones, Alan Lazard all talk highly about Jordan Love. You wonder if, Rodgers says that and he's seeing how Love's performing on the practice field, the strides that he's taken in the film room and just the general overall feeling and buzz around him throughout the course of the season that made him feel that way originally. So it's definitely that the Packers didn't play up to expectations. Neither did Rodgers. But another factor in this is Jordan Love, because this is just a pure guess, but if they feel this year about Love how they did a year ago, they might be trying to work things out with Rodgers instead and try to get him back here.
He's a writer at the Dairyland Express and Packers Wire. He is Paul Bretl. Paul, before I get to Jordan Love, I do want to ask you a couple questions about Jordan Love. We know Aaron Rodgers at some point is going to be traded to the New York Jets. But I'm on Twitter. I'm on social media. I watch the sports shows. And so everyone's talking about the biggest question right now is, who has the most leverage? Is it the Packers or is it the Jets? I'm of the belief that the Packers have the most leverage here, Paul, because the Jets, they missed out on Derek Carr. They missed out on Jimmy Garoppolo. And if they don't trade for Aaron Rodgers, their quarterback this year is going to be Zach Wilson. He was pathetic last year, Paul, and he was terrible. And I wish him nothing but the best moving forward. But he was pathetic last year, Paul. We got to call it what it is. So that's their alternative besides Aaron Rodgers, and the Packers already have their quarterback waiting in Jordan Love to take the reins from Aaron Rodgers. So I believe the Packers got more leverage than the Jets. Who do you believe have more leverage, the Packers or the Jets, in negotiating?
I agree with everything you said. The Packers do. They have, like you said, they have their quarterback who's going to be their week 1 quarterback, and it's not it's not a compromise. It's the guy that they've groomed for 3 years. They also have time on their side. There's no real sense of urgency for them because that $60 million that Rodgers is owed, that doesn't kick in until I think September 1st. Not that I expect this to drag out to that point, but it's not like there's any immediate deadline for that salary getting paid that they're trying to get out of. From a salary cap perspective, it's cheaper right now for him to have Rodgers on the roster than it is not to. So I think all of those aspects, and then like you mentioned, the Jets have no fallback option on this. They sent their owner, GM, coach out to California to speak to Rodgers.
Yeah.
The fan base is, as they should be, the Jets fan base is hyped up right now because they think they're getting Aaron Rodgers. And I mean, Robert Saleh, I think he's 11-23 in his 2 seasons.
Yeah.
As the head coach. Joe Douglas has been the GM for 3 years now. Like, if they go into the season with anyone but Aaron Rodgers as the starting quarterback, given how this offseason has transpired so far, I mean, that's a failure, especially for a team that truly believes that there's a Super Bowl contender with the quarterback. And the Packers, I'm sure, know this, and that's why we're in the stalemate right now. And Ian Rappaport said on Monday that the draft could be kind of the first real deadline, because obviously if you're the Packers, any draft capital you receive, you probably want it for the 2023 season versus 2024.
Yeah.
So there's really no timetable for this, and that's kind of the first benchmark that we're going to run up to. And I'm not saying it's going to get to that point, but there's nothing really before it that would stop it.
And also, Paul, too, another reason why I believe that the Packers have more leverage than the Jets is because there are no other suitors that want Aaron Rodgers' services right now. And it has nothing to do with ability. It's because he's not committed beyond this season. If I'm selling something, Paul, and it's of value to me, even if I want to get rid of it very badly and I want it gone, if you my only buyer, I have the leverage because no one else is trying to buy what I'm selling. So I have all the leverage because I know, and like no one else is trying to buy this. So I can put whatever price tag I want on this item that I'm selling, Paul. I think that's the same thing with the Packers and the Jets in these negotiations. The Packers have Aaron Rodgers, but no other team is interested in Aaron, Paul. So I think the Packers can honestly ask the Jets for whatever the hell they want. And if the Jets want to get Aaron Rodgers, they got to give it up. To that you say what, Paul?
I hadn't thought of it from that perspective, but it makes sense. And I think from the start of this, even before we got to this point, the number of suitors that were there for Aaron Rodgers, I'm guessing is very small. I mean, you mentioned he might only play for one more season, and how many teams truly feel that they're a quarterback away from being a Super Bowl contender, because that's who's going to make this deal. That's already a very small group of teams that you're working with. And then there's the magnitude of his contract, the draft capital giving up. So I think from the get-go, this was a very small pool that the Packers had to negotiate with in terms of trying to deal Aaron Rodgers.
Now, Paul, assuming Rodgers has played his last down, and it's assuming because you never know what could happen. Assuming he's played his last down as a Packer, the man has 475 touchdown passes, 105 interceptions, 59,055 passing yards, completing 65% of his passes for his career. Obviously, he's a 4-time NFL MVP. He won a Super Bowl and a Super Bowl MVP. Assuming he's played his last down as a Packer, what does his legacy as a Packer look like to you, Paul?
I mean, he's been so fun to watch, and I've been so appreciative of him and his time here as a Green Bay Packer. Just the feeling that you get throughout the years when you're watching the game on the television and you can tell that he's holding on to the ball. What initially he's looking for isn't there, and then all of a sudden you start to you see him cock the ball back to unwind. You just get this feeling of excitement because something big's going to happen. Like just that feeling.
I know it all too well, Paul. Yeah, I know it all too well.
You can't replace it. And so I'm just grateful I've had the opportunity to watch him, that he's been the quarterback of this Green Bay Packers team for all of the memories, the fun moments, the joy on Sundays that he's brought me. So if I had to sum it up in one word, it would be just very appreciative of everything that he's done for the Green Bay Packers during his time here and all the fun that he's brought me and every other Cheesehead out there.
Now, Paul, let's talk about Jordan Love. You talked about him already a little bit. I got a notification to my phone earlier that it's reported that Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, and Aaron Jones, they're flying to California, Paul, to work out with Jordan Love. So I was excited as a Packers fan to hear that news earlier. And obviously, so far, Jordan Love, he has 3 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. He played in that game 2 years ago in Kansas City, the week that Aaron had COVID. And the Packers didn't win that game. But there were some things that I saw that I liked from Jordan Love and some things that weren't so nice to see. So what is your assessment of Jordan Love so far? And what do you expect from him as we get into the off-season programs and, into the season by September? What is your expectations, Paul?
So obviously just the small sample size, it's tough to give kind of a full evaluation, but that Eagles game, there's a couple things that really stood out. And one was his footwork. And going back to last summer, Tom Clements, Packers quarterback coach, who's going to be back as well with the Packers this year, which I think is huge. As everyone knows, he was a big part of Aaron Rodgers' development when he was a young starter. And I don't think it's a coincidence that Love took this leap in year 3 when Tom Clements is the quarterback coach. But Clements said last summer they were going back to the basics, and for quarterbacks, that's the footwork. Keeping your feet moving, making sure that they're moving with your eyes as you go through your progressions. And I think that's a big thing that we saw through the Eagles game. Another aspect was Love's decisiveness in his decision making. So going back to the 2021 summer in the preseason games, Matt LaFleur and Nathaniel Hackett, when he was the offensive coordinator here in Green Bay.
Yeah.
The thing that they kept mentioning throughout that preseason was, we want to see Love let it rip. That was their phrase. Let it rip, let it rip. And of course, that doesn't mean being reckless with the ball, heaving it downfield. But when you are making your reads, going through your progressions, you see your guy open, let it rip. Trust what you see and let it go. And he wasn't doing that. Against the Eagles, he was definitely doing that. So I think those are two things that are extremely promising and part of that little glimpse behind the curtain that we got to see from the outside looking in his development. So as far as what do we want, or what do I want from him this season, I just want to see a steady progression. You know, if we think of Aaron Rodgers' first season as a starter, I think the Packers were 6-10. They missed the playoffs. So this season, while it's going to be difficult for us as Packer fans, to a degree, it goes beyond the win-loss column. Are we seeing steady improvement from him from week to week? If he makes a mistake one week, has he corrected it the next? Or are those errors continuing to stack on top of each other? The big thing that the Packers want to know a year from now, or even 10 months from now, by next January, is can Jordan Love be the guy of the future? The worst thing that can happen is we get to next offseason and there's kind of a, maybe he could.
Yeah.
They need to know. They need to know we're extending them, or we're going into the draft looking for our next guy. And so for Love, we just want to see that progression throughout the course of the season. And to a degree, there's obviously there's going to be leniency. It's his first year as a starter. There's going to be ups and downs. There's going to be mistakes. But the thing with sitting 3 years on the bench and learning is, you know, there's going to be less latitude for those errors as well. Because yeah, it's your first year as a starter, but it's your fourth year in the NFL. You've been backing up Aaron Rodgers. So again, it just comes to a steady progression from him throughout the season. And again, going back to Rodgers' first season as a starter, Packers were 6-10, as I mentioned, but you could see, you know, some tangible aspects of playing the quarterback position that got you really excited. And so those are the things that I think we should want to see from Love this season.
And I think Paul, the important thing for Jordan, and I made a post about it as soon as I heard that Aaron was going to be more than likely traded at some point. I made a post about it, and I said, Jordan Love, Packer Nation believes in you, because the thing is, Paul, we've had 30 years of elite quarterback play between Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers. But I want Jordan Love to understand, and I know Packer Nation feels the same way. Jordan, we don't need you to be Brett Favre. We don't need you to be Aaron Rodgers. If you could be Derek Carr or Russell Wilson, I'm okay with that. You know, I'm good with that. I would take that, because he doesn't have to be great. He just has to be good. And I believe it's the responsibility of the Packers organization, Brian Gutekunst and Mark Murphy, to put the right pieces in play for Jordan Love to be successful and just be good. You don't have to be great. You don't have to be a superhero. Just be good and don't turn the ball over. And I think he could be the long-term answer at quarterback. And honestly, like, I love Aaron, Paul, but Aaron comes with drama. And Brett Favre came with drama. We want a low-maintenance quarterback. And I believe that that's Jordan Love. And I'm optimistic. I'm excited about it, Paul.
I am too. And I think that's a really good point about him being good versus great. You know, we hear about the Matt LaFleur offense and how it's making life easier on the quarterbacks and the players around them, and it comes from the McVay-Shanahan coaching tree. Well, look at what McVay did with the Rams. They got to the Super Bowl with Jared Goff. You know, the Niners got to a Super Bowl with Jimmy Garoppolo. So I think what that goes to show us is, you know, Love doesn't have to be, then in theory anyways, the next Hall of Fame quarterback in order for the Packers to be a Super Bowl caliber team. Obviously, that means the right players have to be around him. He still has, like you mentioned, take care of the ball. He still has to be a solid quarterback, a good quarterback. But success doesn't necessarily mean having to be a Super Bowl or a Hall of Fame caliber player either.
Agreed. Now, when it comes to NFL free agency and the moves that the Packers made, Paul, they signed Tadarius Moore, a safety. They're going to lose Adrian Amos on the back end. They did bring back Keyshawn Nixon. I'm excited about that. They signed Rudy Ford to a 1-year deal as well. Brought in Corey Ballantyne at DB, brought in Tyler Davis as well, a restricted free agent. So what do you think about the Packers' moves so far in free agency?
Special teams, special teams, special teams. Last offseason, or last August, Brian Gutekunst said that the Packers went out of character. Those were his words in terms of how they addressed special teams. And I'm sure we all remember what happened the year before.
Yeah.
But what he meant by that was they made special team specific additions. Typically, the Packers had prioritized offensive and defensive players, and then we'd fit them in wherever they can on special teams. And when that's your mentality, when that unit's an afterthought, you get what you got in 2021. But the Packers did last year. They put an emphasis on it. They bring in a Keyshawn Nixon, Dallin Levitt, Eric Wilson, Rudy Ford, guys who are special team specific players. So in addition, obviously Rich Bisaccia had a massive impact, but having the right players is also helpful too. Brian Gutekunst said after this season, he was going to take the same approach, and that's exactly what they've done. Obviously, we all know what Keyshawn Nixon can do. Tyler Davis led the Packers in special team snaps last year. Rudy Ford is a heck of a flyer, provides safety depth. Travarius Moore has almost 1,100 career special team snaps. Corey Ballantyne was a core special teamer on the Packers from week 10 on last season. So that's where the emphasis is. And I put this on Twitter, by no means is this the be all end all or guarantee success. But when you have a young quarterback as first year starter, capitalizing on your field goal opportunities and winning the field position battle are two, in the grand scheme of things, small things that you can do, but help out your offense in a major way. If they're not routinely, backed up inside their own 20-yard line, if the Packers defense isn't having to, work with short fields, helping to keep the overall score down, I feel like that's the approach that they're trying to take right now to really beef up special teams. And again, they're not going to guarantee anything, but I feel like that's the direction they're going. And as far as the moves they've made from a cap perspective, it's as expected. And we knew going into this, they weren't going to have a ton of cap space available. And right now, when Rodgers is traded, they're going to lose almost $9 million in the space they do have. So right now, over the cap has them at $24 million in available funds. That's going to go down to about 15. And then if the Packers have to pick up any of Rodgers' $59.5 million guaranteed salary, like if that's a part of the trade agreement, say they pick up $10 million of it, their cap goes down another $10 million. So that's weighing on this situation for them. And then there's the draft class that comes in, the practice squad. You want money for in-season spending so you can sign a Rasul Douglas like they did a couple years ago. So they just don't have a ton of cap space available. So I would say for the most part, to me, it's been as expected. They're going to build through the draft. One other thing I'll add is what I think significant is, could they have saved some cap space by cutting or trading David Bakhtiari, Preston Smith, Devondre Campbell? Absolutely. But by keeping them, you're still keeping a strong core around Jordan Love. And that's what you want to do. You want to give him those opportunities to succeed by having the right players around him. And if anyone on this planet wants Jordan Love to succeed, it's going to be Brian Gutekunst. So he's going to keep those guys, and because they still have a strong core. Now they're not going to add to it in free agency, but they still have a strong group around him.
Yeah, and one thing too, I got a couple more questions for you, Paul. One thing too, Paul, there was reports from Diana Rossini of ESPN about how Aaron Rodgers has this wish list of players that he wants to join him in New York. It's Randall Cobb, it's Mercedes Lewis, and a couple other guys. And honestly, for me, Paul, as a Packers fan, I was happy that he put that list out. There was reports about it. Good riddance. I love Randall Cobb. Randall Cobb is one of the best Packer receivers in the Aaron Rodgers era, but Randall Cobb is beyond his prime, Paul. Mercedes Lewis as well. Mercedes Lewis, I love him. He's a proven tight end. He's a veteran on that team, but it's time for Mercedes to go as well. Alan Lazard already signed in New York with the Jets, and he's never been a true number one in my eyes. I thought he did a great job when Devontae was in Green Bay as a number two, but he was never a number one receiver. So I got to throw it out there, Paul, that some of those players that Aaron Rodgers reportedly wants to go with him to the Jets, I wouldn't be opposed to moving on from those guys. I don't even think they're under contract this year anyway. So the only reason why they were Packers last year was because of Aaron Rodgers. But Randall Cobb is past his best days, and Mercedes Lewis as well. So I'm looking at the receiving core now, Paul. You got Romeo Doubs, you got Christian Watson, you got Sumere Toure as well. Those are the only three receivers that are proven in a way that Jordan Love has to throw the football to. So we know the Packers never drafted a receiver in the first round in the Aaron Rodgers era. And I wonder, Paul, if the Packers, if they want to stick it to Aaron and draft a receiver in the first round of the playoffs, because it's kind of a need at this point. What do you say about the receiving room?
And if that happened, I think Twitter would melt down a little bit. the irony in that would just be through the roof. But I agree with you on your assessment of it. So I looked this up the other day. Romeo Doubs is currently the most experienced Packers receiver in terms of snap counts with 529.
Really?
So that's why I think with the limited cap space they have, bringing in a veteran would be valuable. And again, this isn't going to be a top of the line game-changing receiver. It's going to be just someone to provide some stability, because even in year two, especially with the injuries that Watson and Doubs dealt with in year one, they missed time. There's still going to be ups and downs, in year two. And so just having a veteran to provide a little bit of stability for Jordan Love, I think could be valuable. And in no way should that impact how they go about the draft. If the right guy's there for him at pick 15, take that pick. So I think that's absolutely in play. It's a big need for them, just to round out the depth. And even, say they get that veteran presence, this is still a unit that can use more playmaking. Christian Watson looks like a bona fide number one. Romeo Doubs was solid, but you still need more playmaking opportunities there. And one position where they could add more playmaking too is tight end, because they were missing that last year as well.
It was sad to see Robert Tonyan go to the Bears, Paul. It was sad, man. I was sad, like, really, Robert, come on, man. But I get it, and listen, I pray they don't make the same mistake they made last year when they signed veteran receiver Sammy Watkins. He was pathetic, man. He was awful last year, Paul. I don't know he had a nice career, but he was I didn't. No, Sammy, he ain't got it no more, man. And I saw it. I saw it because I went to the Packers game last year when they played the Bears week 2, and Sammy Watkins probably had his best game as a Packer, but that was it. So you think they should get a receiver and get not a top tier guy, but maybe like a middle of the pack kind of receiver?
Yeah, because again, they don't have the cap space to bring in any of the top guys that are left. So over at Dairyland on Sunday, using Pro Football Focus's top 200 free agent list, I looked for which receivers were available at under the contract projection of under $5 million per year. Reason I picked that number, because if it's a 2-year deal or if the Packers add void years to it, you can get that cap hit down to a couple $1 million and be digestible. So, name from the list, because a few of them have already been signed, but the one name that stands out on that list is Marvin Jones. We know him from his time with the Lions. He was with the Jacksonville Jaguars last year. Like someone of that ilk, who's got experience, who's been a sound pass catcher, someone that Love can lean on in addition to Doubs and Watson, and then again, go draft an early round rookie to help, round out that group. And then you got Sumere Toure as well. So that's kind of the vision that I had for that receiver position.
He's a writer at the Dairyland Express and Packers Wire. He is Paul Bretl. Paul, let everyone know where they can find you on social media.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find my work at Dairyland Express and Packers Wire. I can find me on Twitter at Paul_Bretl. That's Bretl.
Paul, I appreciate you joining me tonight on the Wise Guys Show. I'm going to definitely be bringing you back on as we get into the summer, get into OTAs and in training camp. I'm a diehard Packers fan, Paul, and you give me all my information and things that I need to know, everything when it relates to the Green Bay Packers. I appreciate you joining me tonight.
Hey, always appreciate you having me. Looking forward to next time.
Appreciate you. That is Paul.